Bill, and couple little, anybody would like to come up and talk on this bill? Really what we're doing is saying where these games and how many where they can be placed. And so members, if you flip over, I don't think there's anybody here who wants to present the bill, so I'll talk about it, I guess, briefly. We'll just flip over and go through the bill. So the establishment definition is on page 2. And then you can see truck stop is defined and smoke shop, and then restrictions on the operation. And you can see those located in subsection E and of this section, which is defines the establishment piece. And so basically, if I can summarize this, and there's folks in the room, it's basically places that allow liquor license, adult places, and truck stops, adult areas of truck stops. And I'm seeing heads nod. So in short, okay, members, any questions on the bill? Okay, we'd like to open this up to public comment. So we have 3 seats up here if you want to fill up the seats, and come on up, introduce yourself and who you represent, and we're glad to hear from you.
Good morning, members of the committee. Jonathan Downing, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of Cowboy Skill and Pace-O-Matic. Also joined by Jeff Horton with Paradise Pinball and Amusement out of Cheyenne, Wyoming, one of the Cowboy Skill operators here in Wyoming. And then Catherine Wilkinson, also with Cowboy Skill and Pace-O-Matic. We come to you today in support of this legislation for some of the members of the committee that are new to this issue. One of the, just briefly as far as a history of skill games in Wyoming. When skill games were proposed as far as legislative matter, as far as for legislation back in the 2020 session, before that time,
in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when it was originally in statute. Can maybe give us a little history on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And some of those were a little bit before my time, but as far as on the definition of what skill constitutes in statute, I could defer to Catherine here in a moment, if that would be okay as far as those pieces. And but in the meantime, Mr. Horton has also had plenty of experience with some of those in the pinball areas and some of the other pieces on that end. So briefly, if you'd like to cover some of that history, prior to 2020, though, however, you did have a number of games that were coming along I-80 that were not necessarily regulated. There were questions as to whether those games met the definition of skill that's currently in statute, was in statute before then, and then following the changes of 2020. And so within that time period, the members of Cowboy Skill, and specifically to this bill in particular, had come to the legislature and had said, we'd like to have a regulatory framework for regulation of skill games. And part of that was from a corporate citizen standpoint of saying skill games should not be in under 21 locations was part of the rationale there. There are gaming devices not in our side of the industry, but that are 18 and over that you might find in other parts of Wyoming statute as far as those areas, which we can always get into later if desired. But I do want to be clear that as far as Cowboy Skill games, they're not like what you would see in like a historic horse racing type of environment. They're not what you'd see as far as like in a Keno environment with the lottery. And along those lines, when the statutory framework came into play, it was saying for your VFWs, your American Legions, your some of those entities, as well as like your bars and restaurants, and in truck stops, it was mainly going, let's have this in an over 21 area. But we clearly didn't want to look like our neighbor to the north, where you have a large proliferation of certain games up that way. And so that's why we had asked for a limit of 4 games per location. In 2020, when that legislation had passed, there were a number of things that also occurred a little bit in the special session, and then also within 21 and 22, as far as trying to continue to build upon that regulatory framework. As some of you will remember, we had asked for sideboards on where games go, how many games are out there, because we didn't want to have proliferation of games and have unintended consequences as a result of those. And so in that context, that's why you don't often hear from the private sector of saying, please regulate, but we believe this is a type of entertainment device that should be regulated. With that, we could, as far as the bill itself, we are supportive of what's in the bill. There were some discussions over on the Senate side as far as what constitutes a truck stop. And just for some context on truck stops, during 2020, when a number of things in Wyoming were shut down, truck stops were one of the few things that were open along I-90, along I-25, along I-80. And your commercial drivers, when they have their downtime, also are looking to do something besides just, watch videos and that type of thing, and have something to get out of the cabin and hang out. And so that was part of the entertainment package that are within some of those locations. In addition to that, you also have some rules that are on the second floor right now. I expect that they're probably going to be acted upon here in the next month. With those rules, they have some parameters on what qualifies a location of over 21. It's similar to what you might see in your liquor laws, as far as like the short wall to delineate where an over 21 area is versus under 21. You also, within that area, with those rules, have some additional sideboards that had been within the earlier parts of the law, that had been discussed, that should have a good foundation for saying this is where these go, this is where they don't go. And in that context, as we look at this bill, if you, with those nuances of what's in the statute, if you don't have this bill go through, our deep concern is that you would have really no control over where games go, because this bill mainly says restricted to 21 and over in these locations. If you don't pass the bill under the existing proposed rules, as long as it's 21 and over designated area, you don't really have limits. And prior to 2020, you would have situations where you might have skill games, not ours, but you might have skill games in the back of a retail store along I-80. Not really exactly what you'd be thinking of a gaming environment. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Jeff Horton, if at your pleasure, and he can talk a little bit about their company in Wyoming.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Jeff Horton. I'm with Paradise Pinball and Amusement here in Cheyenne. My family has been here since 1888. I'm the 5th generation. I've raised my family here. Now they're raising theirs. Wyoming is very important to me and how we look to other states. The skills-based games are based on your skill, not the software of the game. You control the game. 4 basic skills you need is memory retention, pattern recognition, hand-eye dexterity, and time execution. Cowboy Skills is in partnership with 8 vendors across the state. They're all operating Pace-O-Matic skill games. They all started out as small businesses, as vendors for coin-operated entertainment, pool leagues, dart leagues, coin-operated entertainment, ATMs. I think it's very important that we define where the skill-based amusement games are going to be placed. As the statute reads now, it's pretty open. I've been chasing some big players throughout the United States have been just saturating Cheyenne just here in our market, and they're hitting everywhere. They have no discretion on where they're going to go. As of right now, like Jonathan said, liquor licenses is where we've been placing our games now. VFWs, elk lodges, moose lodges, fraternal orders, truck stops, and the Senate just had added the smoke shops, which is another age appropriate. The only restrictions that we see now in this statute is putting up a roped area or a wall in any area. I believe that the game should be in age appropriate and restricted locations. And that's why I'm in support of Senate File 41 that I ask you guys support.
Okay, any questions? Mr. Horton, how long has your family been in kind of the skill?
I just recently got into, I've been in small business all my life. We've been ranchers. And I kind of fell into this after some medical issues. I got out of the construction business and I love it. I wish I'd have been 20 years ago in this industry.
Yeah.
It's getting out and meeting all the other small business owners and seeing how these places operate. And it's just people just like me. It's just another aspect.
Very good. Any questions? Okay, thanks. And you'll be here if we have further questions. Mr. Wilkin, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Catherine Wilkinson on behalf of Pace-O-Matic and Cowboy Skill. As to that definition, I can't quote you exactly from the statute, but it focuses on a player's strategy where a person has control over a game rather than an element of chance, which you'll see like in the slot machines. And in skill-based amusement games, you can win every time if you are patient and skillful enough. So that is a distinguishing factor. And then
Well, just give us a little history though. Go back to like the 60s and 70s and some of this skill talk. Some of
sure.
us older people.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So I guess starting with Wyoming, just in general, gambling in Wyoming is illegal except, and then we have a whole bunch of exceptions. So we have HHR, which are the historic horse machines, which you'll see around the state. And those have opt-ins with the counties. And then I believe that poker is fine if it's a bona fide social relationship. There's the lottery, which, you know, you've got Keno and some of their games that are involved with us. And then we came in 2020. Am I missing any of the others? But a lot of our machines, our founder, Michael Pace, actually has roots in encampment, goes way back to actually creating the pot of gold, which were sold to a lot of the Indian casinos. And then he's the mastermind behind developing these skill games where you can actually win. He's just kind of changed through the years of developing this software. In Wyoming and stuff, I know that bars have had off and on gray games, what were called gray games, which were kind of more like slot machines off and on throughout the 70s. I've heard stories of some of our operators that are two generations of, you know, finding machines in, you know, some of these bars that they've been in. I don't know if that helps a little bit, Mr. Chairman, with the history. Oh, pool and darts. I think it was in 1985, actually, Mr. Chairman, that there was a resolution to, I think it was, I don't know if it was a legislature or a county resolution, but I did hear about this the other day that was the first, the citizens of the town wanted pool to be declared a game of skill. And so I think it was, and I'm not sure if that's codified in the statute or if it was a county resolution, but I did hear the other day that was 1985. Mr. Reitman had quoted that in one of his podcasts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would just add that we have not expanded. So we have been waiting for the rules to be promulgated by the Gaming Commission. So there has not been any expansion of skill games since 2020. Like Mr. Downing said, we do expect those rules to be signed by the governor. They're within the 75-day timeframe of the APA where they are on his desk. And so without this, we do expect a proliferation of games. And so we would ask that you take the control and decide where those games can go. So we would stand in support of that. Right now, I think there are 836 games in 232 locations. The Cowboy Skill has the majority of the market between our 8 different companies that all offer the Pace-O-Matic games that make up Cowboy Skill. I believe we are down to 611 right now in 202 locations.
I don't have all the statute in front of me, but is it 4 per establishment too? Just trying to work up.
Mr. Chairman, it is up to 4 per establishment. Some establishments, it doesn't make any sense to have more than 1, just depending on the space. So skill games have always been designed as a supplement to small business. They are not like an end destination casino. They've always meant to supplement. And up to 4, the game play is up to $3 with a minimum play of 8 cents. And then a maximum payment of 3,000.
Sure. And all that memory, like 2020 talk, that was, yeah, seeing that. Questions, members, I just real quickly, while you 3 are here, just looking at the gross compared to the original bill that came out of revenue. Any other, I mean, you mentioned the truck stop and they took out the 50,000 gallons of fuel, and any other changes that we need to know about, or you want to talk about those discussions? We didn't go back and watch the Senate YouTube.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you did have the smoke shop definition added, and we were supportive of that. We recognize that there were, while we don't among our members have any locations in smoke shops, we still felt it was important to be supportive of the others within the industry in that respect. Within the definition of truck stop, we had, when it was on the Senate side, there had been a fair amount of discussion of truck stop, and the sponsor of that amendment I believe had wanted to be a little bit broader on that because of the getting into putting in the number of gallons as well as the acreage for the truck stop that had been discussed back during the interim. Their concern at that time and not speaking for them, but what was mentioned in committee was mainly if you had a 2-acre location, but it was, or if you had a 1.8 acre location, but it was requiring 2 acres for truck stop. And so going more to the commercial nature of a truck stop with commercial truck parking, with diesel being in those locations. And so those were the areas where they had touched on. And I do understand that the department or the gaming commission may have a proposed amendment. And in our review of that amendment, we don't foresee any issues with that amendment. And so it's we're pretty, if they'd like to go there, we don't have an issue with it. As far as the short amendment regarding that we saw just before committee and a little bit earlier this week. One last piece that I was remiss in mentioning, and this was for some of the new folks as far as why is this in front of Revenue Committee? Skill games, when they went into effect, the tax that the industry had agreed with the legislature on back in 2020 was a 20% tax on the net proceeds of the games. And within our games, that tax is essentially one of those that we'd ask so that we might be able to prepay that tax, and having that option within statute. And so in some of your older statute, that's there. As far as where the tax goes, 45% of that tax what's collected goes to cities, towns, and counties on a formula. The other 45% goes to school foundation, and then the remaining 10% goes to the commission for regulation and oversight. And year to date, we're approximately 5 million. I want to say 5 million in taxes generated. That number would likely increase when rules go into effect. While those rules were being promulgated and the like, and we appreciate the agency as far as their work on getting to this stage where they're able to get the rules in while the legislative environment was changing a bit. While those rules were going into effect, you could not transfer games. And then if you had businesses that shut down during the downturn and the other events of 2020, you weren't able to sit there and move those licenses around to other locations. And so when we talk about not having expansion of Cowboy skill games or being in these other locations that we hear a lot of in the news lately, our games have still remained in a position where it's been going down versus being able to put them into other locations where businesses have been asking for them. And some of that's just back to when you have some of these, when you're trying to have entertainment within a bar or restaurant and you have other entertainment down the street, it's a hard, deeply competitive market. And so respectfully, please support the bill. If you have any questions, we will always seek to be available, and also we'll make sure to have folks available if you ever want demonstrations or anything else.
Questions? Okay, Representative, I'm gonna start on the end, Representative Locke and then Representative Bear. And then we'll just keep working.
Thank you. And I'm not sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not sure who all I'm asking this question to, so maybe people.
They're in the hot seat.
Everywhere.
Grabbing
So,
all of them.
so this bill just changes the locations that allow the gaming. Is that true? So it restricts it rather than, so we're restricting where these can be available. Is that correct?
Go ahead, Ms. Wilkinson.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. So this is putting only in liquor licenses, locations with liquor licenses, truck stops, and smoke shops. So you as a legislature would be making a policy decision as to where these games can go. Right now, the only existing framework is that they must be in an area that is 21 and up.
Thank you.
So college student unions, teacher lounges. I mean, really, it's pretty wide open. And so this is really needed. And when you say that, I mean, as we take more testimony, I get nervous about amending a bill like this because then we're gonna have to go through that conference committee process. So not that the Senate improved it, but okay. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Downing, I think you can address this. I had a conversation earlier today about this grandfather clause in the bill. And I just like your interpretation of it. Do you believe that it's going to be based on the machines that are currently at those locations? Or do you think it's based on the location itself? In other words, if one of these grandfathered in locations had machines that eventually deteriorated to the point they needed to be replaced, would they be able to be replaced? Thank you.
Wants to take that question.
And
Go ahead.
And
Mr.
Mr.
Downing.
Chairman, and I'm just pulling up the amendment. With the, as I understand it, when the agency had visited with their legal counsel, that's where their legal counsel had said their interpretation was that you wouldn't be able to replace those grandfathered machines. With the challenges that have been there over the past few years of not having everything specific within this legislation and the challenges that have occurred for the legislature, if the AG's office is saying they want to add an S in there, I'm mainly going if they want to have at it. But that's on the agency side. So that's where we're leaving it.
I think Ms. Wilkinson wants to add to that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, so an operator in the skill-based amusement game statutes is actually the establishment. So an operator is someone who owns the bar, the truck stop, the liquor license. So the way that I read it is that would continue on with whatever games are currently in place now, that establishment itself could continue with those games. That's how I interpret this. Of course, there can always be a difference, and there is of an opinion, but that is how I read it.
Okay, Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other question. So if based on this change, if I wanted to create a gaming facility, but I didn't want to have a liquor license, and I just wanted to create a building, make it 21 or only, could come in there, put these games in there. Would it be safe to say that this would not allow that?
Go ahead, Ms. Wilkinson.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe so unless you have a liquor license or you're in a truck stop or a smoke shop, then that is correct because this bill would limit exactly where those games may be located.
I think we saw that too in 2020. They were starting to really, there was one across the street from my school, you know, and then it's gone now. So, yeah. Okay, further questions down here, Representative Store?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Probably a question for Mr. Downing. Is there anything in statute that allows a city or county to authorize skill-based games locations?
Go
Miss-
ahead,
Miss-
Mr. Honey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In statute, this is a framework, but it's on a statewide level. And so part of the rationale, so right now, cities and counties, they can regulate locations of liquor licenses and things like that through zoning. And they also have a very big hammer if a liquor licensee is getting out of line on a particular area. However, when this legislation was brought forward, it was realizing that there are other parts within Wyoming's gaming industry that already have the ability to offer within local jurisdictions without local jurisdictions approval. And not throwing any of those under the bus, but just if you look at the Wyoming lottery, that was a state action by the legislature to allow for the lottery to take effect. And so part of what we were mirroring off of back in 2020 was mainly the fact that you'd already had statewide authorization in that respect for lottery terminals, as well as now you have Keno within that space as well. And in those areas, those are the pieces where it's one of those that the legislature had addressed it back in 2020. We've since that time continued to work with local governments to make sure that as far as cowboy skill operators, that we're complying with any and all local laws. We have a compliance officer who's a former head of Homeland Security, who goes out and does compliance checks on all of our locations, make sure they're complying with the existing law. And if he sees issues, then he addresses those not only with the business owner, but also the vendor operator. And within Pace-O-Matic, we have a code of conduct that is required of companies that operate our games. If they're out of compliance with that code of conduct, Pace-O-Matic as the manufacturer has withdrawn their ability to operate those games. And so as far as self-policing within the industry, that's how we're addressing those. But to answer your question, no, it's been statewide at this level.
Hey, I think we're I want to get to the director of the commission, and we got a quick question. Go ahead, Vice Chair Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it has to do with the next speaker. You mentioned a proposed rule by the commission, but maybe
Amendment, yeah, I
or
think
amendment, but maybe I missed it. What? in
Director
reference to
Moore's
what?
right here, yeah,
I know, but if they're here, what?
yeah,
you-
go
you
ahead.
Referenced it and then we didn't discuss what, if you want to.
So the proposed amendment and this is on page 3 of the engrossed copy, line 15. And it would read, any operator who on or before September 14, 2022 had a skill-based amusement game located at a place of business that does not meet the definition of establishment shall be authorized to continue operating it. Delete the skill-based amusement and then insert S after game so then it would read, shall be authorized to continue operating skill-based amusement games if the operator meets the requirements to operate a skill-based amusement game. And so it's mainly a delete of the and add an S. And if,
Yeah, okay. As I read, okay, go ahead, Vice Chair.
So I just was wondering your opinion, if any, or comments before you guys.
I don't know that it matters, frankly. But we were mainly on the lines if the AG wants to take a run at it. And I'd let the department speak for themselves as far as their rationale behind that area.
Okay, very good. Thank you for being here, and you're still here in case we have more questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Should go to any state Revenue, you're not here for this bill. New, okay, so we have Gaming Commission here, Director Moore. Morning.
Good morning. Thank you, committee members. My name is Charlie Moore. I'm the director of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. Appreciate you having me here today and being able to speak on Senate File 41. If you don't mind, would you like me just to jump in, Chairman? Okay. To speak to the last question, and they're handing out the amendments. First and foremost, the change that we're seeing here is only going to affect the way it sits currently would only affect, I believe, 2 to 3 locations in the state. So, and what we received from the Attorney General's office in an interpretation is the proposed bill says that the operator shall be authorized to continue operating the skill-based amusement game. It could be argued that by using we are referring only to specific games, i.e. the games that are already in place. If that's the case, then if those grandfathered games are removed, then they cannot be replaced. By deleting the and saying games, adding the S, it clarifies that we're grandfathering the operator's ability to continue having skill games as a whole. So first, like I said, we're only looking at 2 to 3 locations. So the change would be would only, the way it is, would only affect a couple. And again, by deleting, and you have that amendment, deleting the and adding the S would have that clarity and provide clarity for the commission. And again, this is a policy decision. However you decide to do this, we'll implement it. That's not a problem, but I wanted to make sure we brought this to your attention.
Thank you. Any questions of the director? Okay, any other comments on the bill? I guess Representative Oakley has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I was gonna say. Is any further opinion or thoughts for us?
Thank you, Chairman Harshman, Representative Oakley. No, everything else, one thing that we all need to bear in mind, going back to gaming and gambling in general, it's a highly regulated, it needs to be highly regulated, and we always look forward to receiving that regulation from the body, from you all giving us policy directions. So thank you.
Just a question on the Senate changes to truck stops and smoke shops. And I guess my thing with the truck stops, does that open it up a little more? I mean, removing that 50,000 gallons of fuel is that's a different truck stop than a place with a diesel island.
Chairman Harshman, thank you for the question.
I guess our thoughts when
Yeah.
we were crafting this, we're thinking I-80.
Right.
We know all those places we're talking about.
Right. We've looked at this and I think that it is an appropriate way to go. I think it provides all of us guidance on this. With the truck stops, there's a little bit of a dilemma, monitoring some of that, making sure that we've got those appropriate locations and we're getting that information. But again, in speaking with our special agents and our inspectors, they feel like this can be done relatively easily. So I think
So a truck stop though would have to apply to you first. I mean, it's not gonna just get a game and you go, oh, I didn't know you had that there. I mean, this all goes through you. Is that correct?
Chairman Harshman, yes, that is correct.
And you put a sticker on the game, you have approved games, all that is for the, yes. Yeah.
Chairman Harshman, yes. Each and every game is stickered and they're approved. Games that come into the state, new games that come into the state are reviewed and authorized. The Gaming Commission authorizes those games. And then also periodically, we're in those locations statewide monthly, reviewing those games. Our auditors are, once we get the rules in place, our auditors will be in there auditing these machines, and we're verifying the software that's on every one of these machines as well through signature verifications. And we do that currently right now. But once the rules are in place, we have guidance. The operators, the establishments, the vendors, they have guidance as well. And we can move forward and feel very positive.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? The Director, Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious whether anyone's thought about the impact of the SF-13, where we're looking at phasing out the limitations on bar and grill licenses, and whether that will lead to a greater proliferation of skill-based amusement game locations across the state.
Chairman Harshman, Representative Storer, I have not looked at that. I apologize for that. There may be another gentleman in the room here that can maybe speak a little more to that. It's a little closer to the liquor licenses and some of that information. I apologize.
Any other questions? Okay. I think, so thank you for being here, and you're here if we have further questions. Anybody here would like to testify on this bill one way or the other? And it's 8:39 and just trying to do an hour per bill. It's not a hard deal, but
Excuse me, Mr.
if
Chairman.
you want to talk, come on up and take a seat
Mr.
and
Chairman,
we'll,
we also have Nicholas Laramandi from the Wyoming Gaming Commission online.
okay? Go ahead if you want to, go ahead, start.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mike Mosier, Wyoming State Liquor Association. I've never been called a gentleman before, but I think I probably can nail your question when we get to it. We're a trade association of 400 retailers. The one thing, and they're all over the board, bars, restaurants, clubs, legions, VFWs, everything. The one thing that holds us together is we sell a product. That product is something that we make money off of. In fact, I was a retailer for years. But as part of that, we know, and I know personally, the negative impact that product can have, which is why temperance and moderation is important. We feel it's so important. In fact, over the last 23 years, we've trained with the liquor division over 40,000 Wyomingites in a 3 to 4 hour class on responsible alcohol service. That temperance and moderation, that view towards that, is the same approach we took when we approached skill games. That cap of 4, we supported. We did not want more than 4 games. We wanted the focuses of our business to remain hospitality and retail. We did not want to be like the neighbor to our north. And so in that same spirit, committee, I'm coming to you in support of Senate Bill 41. In temperance and moderation to be able to control the proliferation, if you will, or stop a proliferation of these machines. These games have been very important for my retailers and for the businesses in your district. For a number of clubs, bars, and restaurants, those 4 little skill games got them through a COVID pandemic. We're going into a recession right now. That steady source of revenue has been vital. Couple quick things, Mr. Chairman, then I'll take any questions. And I guess if you want to ask historical questions, I was there for most of it, so I could probably get those too. First of all, one of the good things about this bill is it puts it in appropriate establishments. A restaurant or a bar is not limited to a 21-year-old, but we card everybody. We're trained to card people and we know how to card people. Same is true of smoke shops. That's why we're cool with smoke shops. They're not members of mine, but I can understand that they do know who's 21 or not. Also, as Mr. Downing alluded to, we also hold a license. And if we make the city mad, they can affect our ability to have that license. It gives them a stick that they don't have with any other business. The other difference, committee, there's been discussion about the expansion of gaming in Wyoming. It's not skills game. In fact, if I were to ask you how many establishments in your district have skill games, you probably couldn't tell me unless you asked Mr. Moore, because these games are not advertised on the front of a building. Play your skill games here. There's 4 of them. They're tucked in the back. Unless you actually go into the establishment, you don't even know they're there. They're for our customers, not to draw in business like a big marquee sign would do. Also, part of the reason this bill is important, let's talk about numbers here. Without this bill, I would frankly be stunned if we'd had less than 1,000 new locations open up. You're talking about small retail stores. What happens is Joe's Antique Shop on Main Street opens up, gets 4 skill games. Jane's Knick-Knack Shop, see Joe's doing pretty well. Before too long, every business down your Main Street has signs about skill games. And so these sideboards are vitally important, not just for our businesses, but also for our community. We do not want every antique shop along Main Street having skill games. We want to have it in a controlled environment where we can regulate it. Numbers, right now we have about 300 locations that have skill games. If this bill is not passed, as I mentioned, I would not be surprised to see more than 1,000 new locations, which we do not want, and they would continue to grow because everybody would start wanting to compete in that space. Retailers, we have about 1,400 liquor licenses in Wyoming. I would say about half of them safely don't want skill games, whether they're manufacturers, chains, packaged liquor stores, whatever. So I would be frankly surprised if we did more than doubling the number of places we have now. Now, there are a lot of small businesses and clubs that are waiting for this and have been waiting a couple of years for this, for that expansion to happen, for turtle organizations, small bars and restaurants. And so the expansion is important, but what's important to me and our industry and our communities is when it happens, we want to make sure it's done in a controlled fashion where the municipality and the county has the ability to enforce it, to oversee it, and take care of that. Mr. Chairman, you had some historical questions. I've obviously been here for a lot of it. I will say that we were the first, Mr. Moore would testify, we were the first group to push for a gaming commission. We did it for years before we got one, because regulation is vitally important to the liquor industry and the gaming industry. You cannot overregulate those activities. And so we support the Gaming Commission. It was a religious experience for me when the Gaming Commission opened up, because before then, everybody was trying. You might remember e-bingo in a town very close to you, Mr. Chairman. We had to do legislation to reel that in for a little while. Mr. Armitage and I, back in the old days, had it kind of out when they outlawed poker for a while. We had to do a bill about that. We were all over the board. The advantage now we have continuity at the Gaming Commission. And I will ask any other questions. The amendment doesn't look, I'm like you, Mr. Chairman, amendments that don't do a lot make me nervous when we start looking at crossover and concurrence, but that's of course a decision you will make, and I will take any questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you for being here today. I'm going to go to the county commissioners.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarification. I'm just trying to understand this a little better. When you say small businesses and clubs have been waiting for this, please explain to me why that is.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, good question. What happened was a lot of places were waiting until we made it official in statute that you could have skill games. And unfortunately, when we did, we said you couldn't put any more in. And so I have members and clubs, fraternal organizations that were waiting for us to put this in statute, to put the Gaming Commission in, put in sideboards. But unfortunately, we slammed the door shut when we put it in statute. And so there's been a lot, and I get a lot of calls. There's been a number of places, especially fraternal organizations, it seems, that have been asking and waiting for this to happen. And before I forget, Mr. Chairman, bar and grills, there won't be a whole lot created, so it won't really affect a whole lot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reeman.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Jeremiah Reeman here on behalf of the County Commissioners Association. This has been an important industry for businesses across the state and communities as we've gone through the pandemic and come out of that. We do stand in support of this particular legislation. Obviously, the counties have an interest in this and have heard from some places concerns about locations. And so this will certainly help to address that. I would say that I also hear from commissioners an interest in exploring more of a process for local control. I've heard that discussed here. This bill doesn't necessarily do it, and I'm not asking for a bill this year to do that, but we are interested in exploring that conversation more. I know you've heard about, some of the controls that we may or may not have, and zoning and liquor licenses. Those aren't necessarily perfect tools. Not every community has zoning in place, so that is not necessarily good. Liquor licenses, you have that to offer liquor. That doesn't mean we get to control your gaming license. Now, there certainly can be conversations around what's happening there, but but we are interested in exploring that. I will say the operators in the room have been good partners with us. When we have issues, we can call them. I can call them if I'm hearing issues, and those are addressed, but we are interested in exploring that conversation another day, another bill.
Just to be clear, the commissioners support this bill.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And if you two are done, I think we have others to speak that are waiting for a seat. And then Mr. Gopian, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Nick Agopian. I represent Bankshot LLC and S&C Vending, who's currently a licensed vendor here in the state. We do not support this bill. It's not news to this committee. I testified at all three of the being a revenue committee bill. I attended all three of the interim committee meetings, stood in opposition to this bill. Our opposition still stands. I think my time today, though, is going to be best spent addressing subsection E, so it'd be 1125-303E. I think Representatives Locke and Representatives Bear had drawn some attention to the grandfathering language. We heard from Director Moore this morning that there's 2 or 3 locations. I believe those 2 are locations where my client's skill games are located. And to be clear, those are legal today under the current law. They're in compliance. I haven't heard otherwise from the director. I'm certain that we would have heard otherwise. And it's important for us to maintain those locations. Whether or not they turn to be profitable in the future based on their location, people's willingness to be there, wanting to spend time in those locations, the marketplace will dictate that, but they're legal today. We'd appreciate it. It sounds like the amendment that I did not see, but the amendment sounds to me like it envisions a scenario where if those current games were to be inoperable, or like any other location, if you wanted to add a new cabinet or updated software package in line with your commission approvals, that it would allow for you to do it in those 2 locations, those 8 games. I don't know if that third location's mine or not. So it's important to us, if that's the case, that it creates comfort for the commission to move those, and for the committee to move that amendment forward to give some certainty. That would be great. It's always been our intent, and I think this committee, Mr. Chairman, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the intent when the discussion occurred throughout the interim. I don't have any comments on the Senate amendments. The bill passed out with strong support. With it being today legal, I just want to be clear that for us, that means that we're currently paying our taxes. And I think we heard from previous speakers what that percentage is, that 45% of the taxes paid go to the school kids. And that's really impressive. And in terms of being opposed to this bill at a broader level, I think we don't know what that potential could be if we're choosing to limit that revenue potential and not allow the marketplace to dictate the number of machines in the state and what that capacity is, or what that saturation number might be across Wyoming. It's important as well to acknowledge that today we're operating under significant regulatory oversight. Our ability to grow this industry over the last 2 years since it was legalized by the legislature has been hampered to the extent that government takes time. And we are just maybe 30 days away from getting rules that will allow us to apply for additional licenses in locations. This bill would not allow, and I think this probably speaks to Representative Bear and Representative Locke's questions, it would not allow some window where we could apply before this bill went into effect. I think the intent of the committee was to make sure that that window didn't open and there wouldn't be new locations grandfathered in. And with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Agopian, and I'm sure I should have picked up on this, but I wouldn't support anything that we authorized 2 years ago and then we're restricting now. That's a difficult position to be in. So So what specifically, like the people that you represent, what type of business, I'm trying to understand what. How
Who do you
they-
represent?
So certainly, Bankshot LLC is the software manufacturer for the Skills Game software package that goes through the approval process. And then SNC Vending is the vendor that has the license to put those games here in the state in locations. And then the operator would be those locations getting grandfathered in. Under the current statute or the proposed statutory change. Does that answer your question?
Representative Bear, his question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Agopian. There's a couple of questions that I have, and maybe you can't answer these. It sounds like you're not that familiar with the particular locations, but the questions I would ask, number one is what proximity are they to establishments that are defined in this statute that would be able to have these games? And number two is what kind of controls do these locations have for ensuring that the people are over 21 that have access to these games?
Mr. Gopian?
Mr. Chairman, I would certainly stand to be corrected. It's my understanding that there's a C-store location. And it falls on the operator of that location. They carry the duty to ensure that it's a 21 or over person, so they would have the right to card that individual. Believe that there's a location here in Cheyenne that's in a hotel that's just outside the bar. So I think to your second question, the proximity is very close to where they might be able to locate inside a bar. And then the third, if I understand correctly, there was a laundromat location that had some of these machines in them. And again, they would be subject to the current statute. And then with the forthcoming rule, that area specifically, I don't believe it's by square foot, but there's going to be a half wall requirement around those locations. So we'll have to have those approved by the commission. We'll have to come in and seek approval from the commission to identify with drawings, what our intent is or for those locations would have to come in and show where they're going to put that half wall. But it falls on them statutorily as the location to card those individuals and ensure that individuals playing are over 21.
Okay, very good. Further questions? Good. Okay, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Okay, next, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Ryan Clement. I'm here representing Patriot Contest and Games and Smoker Friendly. Patriot Games, we're kind of the little guy. We're unique in the state. I kind of wear all the hats. I'm an operator and a vendor. I run to all the locations. We have 8 locations in the state where games currently reside. 2 are in Cheyenne. One of those is a bar. The rest are in smoker friendly locations in Torrington, Cody, Evanston, Green River, and Rollins. And so I've been trying to get to Evanston since Monday, but I-80 just hasn't cooperated. So a little bit different than the folks that have come up and talked before. I'm actually in the business. I owned a bar here in downtown Cheyenne called Dillinger's. The games at that location took a year longer to be approved than some of the other games. And really, it really determined our fate as a bar. So we still have our games and we're still licensed, but my bar has been kind of taken over by what they call historic horse racing games. And now it's called the Horse Palace down there on 16th and Central. So whereas we were a small bar with our 4 little games, and I think this is why you support skills games as are defined and written in this statute, we're in strong support of this particular law, is that these things are meant for the neighborhood tavern. They're meant to support small business. And in our case, where we had live music and comedy shows, and we were part of the community with sipping shops, we had vendors come in and sell their stuff at our location. Now it's a casino with historic horse racing games. So that's something that the legislature is going to have to grapple with in the future. But under current circumstances and right now, we've got 27 games in the state with the locations I've already mentioned. And I'm the one-man show here. I do the vendor, the operator, the route runner, distributor. So with that, strong support of the bill, urge your guys' support, and I appreciate it. Stand for any questions.
Questions, Mr. Clement? Okay, thank you for being here today and your
Thank you.
testimony. Anyone else here in the audience? Okay, anybody online? And maybe not, maybe?
Mr. Chairman, we do have Nicholas Laramendi from the Wyoming Gaming Commission online.
Okay. Have a commissioner? with the commission? Got the director right here. Yeah, okay. Very good. Anyone else here? Okay, very good. Oh, we're gonna close public comment. Members, what's your pleasure? Senate File 41 engrossed. Move the bill. It's been moved by Representative Northrop and seconded by Representative Oakley. Okay, working the bill, page 1 to page 2. Any amendments on page 2? Page 3. Any amendments on page 3? Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd move the simple amendment that has been provided that would change. It would eliminate the word the. I'm trying to find it.
The on line 15.
On line.
Gross
thank
copy.
you. On line 15 and make games plural on line 15.
You, Ms. Jeffrey, that's been seconded by Representative Barrett. You have a copy. Okay, very good. Everybody understands the amendment. I think it explained very well to us. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's been adopted. Any further amendments on page 3?
A
Page 4?
question.
What?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I just noted that the effective date is April 1st of this year, and I wanted to understand if, is that so
Director
that
Moore, why don't you come on up and you can kind of give the back history on that? Do you have any?
related to the rules that were referenced earlier? I just
Go
wanted to
ahead.
understand that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Charlie Moore at the Gaming Commission. The April 1st date, I cannot answer why we set that last summer or this summer. But our rules should be in place in the next 30 days or less.
Okay, my recollection is we want to get this started. We've been waiting for 2 years, so we want to get moving as fast as we can with this regulation.
Right. I believe.
In short.
Thank you for that.
Okay, very good. Any other amendments on the bill? Okay, seeing none, please call the roll, Ms. Jeffrey, on Senate File 41 engrossed as amended.
Representative Bear,
Aye.
Representative Byron,
Aye.
Representative Locke,
Aye.
Representative Northrop,
Aye.
Representative Oakley,
Aye.
Representative Storer,
Aye.
Representative Strock. Aye. Representative Zwanitzer cast an absentee vote of aye, and Chairman Harshman.
Aye.
The bill passes.
Okay, very good. And Representative Locke, I think I can sense you want to floor manage this bill. So that'll be yours when it hits the floor, and the commissioners available, everyone's available to work with you on that. Okay, thank you all for being here. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 63. I'd like the department to come up and the director to talk about this bill. This is another joint interim bill, and talk us through kind of some of the history and the interim work, and then maybe the changes to the engrossed bill. Good morning, Director.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. And as you stated, we had brought this topic to the Joint Interim Committee during the summer. And basically, we were just looking for consistent language within both excise tax division statutes and the mineral tax division. And I think it's just easiest if I walk through the bill. Looking at page 2, you'll see I am on the engrossed copy, and I'll discuss the amendment that was made in the Senate as well. So on page 2, you'll see 3914-108. That's our coal statutes. And the added language that is underlined comes from 3915-108B Romanet 3. That language is in the excise tax division or tax statutes, stating the department may credit or waive interest on tax imposed by this section as part of a settlement or for any other cause. We have that exact language under our excise tax statutes, but it was not clear in the mineral tax statutes. The amendment that was provided by the Senate added the term severance tax. For the Department of Revenue, that was a given because 3914, anything in 3914 relates to severance tax only. Our monthly ad valorem, as the committee may remember, in 2022, we started collecting the ad valorem taxes on minerals, but that's chapter 13. But for clarity, the Senate asked that the word severance be included, and we're fine with that. That's the intent of this bill, is to clarify. So as you go through this bill, you'll see 208 is oil and gas, 308 is Trona, 408 bentonite, 508 uranium, 608 is sand and gravel, and then 708 other valuable deposits. So that's basically taking language that we have in excise tax and putting it, which is sales and use tax, and putting it in the mineral statutes. They mirror each other. Going on to page 4, you'll see 3915-108. That's our sales tax statutes. The language at the top of page 5 that states any assessment or levy, including assessment, and then going on, that language comes from the mineral statute, 3914-108B, V, capital E. So we're just mirroring and making sure that for taxpayers that pay both sales and use tax and mineral taxation, that they understand that our authority to waive penalty and interest for good cause is the same in both excise and mineral tax. You'll see the same language again in 3916-108. That's our use tax statutes. And with that, Mr. Chairman, it really does just clarify for our taxpayers that the department's authority to waive interest and penalties is the same regardless of the tax that is imposed. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd answer any questions.
The only change really was to add the word severance.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Yeah, very good. Members, any questions of the good director? Okay. Guess it's a perfect little bill. No, and so just one more, I mean, because I think Representative Storrs agreed to carry this bill on the floor. And and floor manage this, but really just to sum it up, I mean, did it pass unanimously in the other body?
Mr. Chairman, it did. Again, I think it's just
And it,
a matter of cleaning it up for the taxpayers.
or the taxpayer, the mineral taxpayer particularly.
Mineral and excise tax.
Excise. Okay, any other questions of the director, and you'll be available to. Okay, members, any, okay. Any public comment here? Any public comment online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
No online, no public comment here. Okay, we'll close public comment. Members, what's your pleasure on Senate File 63 engrossed?
Move Bill.
Second. Then moved by Vice Chair Oakley, seconded by Representative Northrup. Okay, any amendments, members, as we flip over? Page 2 and 3. Okay, then flip it over to page 4 and 5. No amendments, okay. Please call the roll, Ms. Jeffrey, on Senate File 63. And it has no amendments from this committee.
Representative Bear,
Aye.
Representative Byron,
Aye.
Representative Locke.
Aye.
Representative Northrup,
Aye.
Representative Oakley.
Aye.
Representative Storer.
Aye.
Representative Strock.
Aye.
Representative Zwanitzer presented absentee vote of aye, and Chairman Harshman. The bill passes.
Thank you for your good work, and so the meeting is adjourned. And it's a Thursday, so it's going to be probably next Tuesday, is my guess. Since we have some little more